Hi, I'm Lee with Sanctuary Family Farms. I'm married to Kai. We have two kids. Eli is coming up on 13, and Kerah, our daughter, is about to turn 10. And I am the farmer of the family. A few days ago, Kerah, my 11-year-old daughter, had an emotional breakdown. I didn't wake up that morning and know that I was going to be dealing with that on top of everything else, but dealing with the unexpected is just part of our job descriptions as parents. We had just gotten back from a week vacation that we kind of rushed and planned the prior couple of weeks in anticipation that Kai would be having surgery to finally fix her plantar fasciitis she's been fighting for over a year. We get back on Sunday, and guess what? School started the very next day for the kids. They would rather work around the farm than do school, but school still isn't that bad. Now that we are homeschooling, they are doing all their classes completely online, but this year they made some minor changes to how some of those classes worked and so on. Well, needless to say, for a girl that typically breezes through it, she wasn't real fond of the changes that they were making, and we heard about it for the next several days. Wednesday morning rolled around and we were getting ready to take Kai up for surgery. I noticed Kerah sitting on the couch and I could tell that she had been crying. So I sat down beside her and did the typical dad stuff, hoping it was something stupid like fighting with Eli. Hey, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And in the midst of the tears, I finally deciphered some real irrational reason behind it. Yeah, I get it. Something else is up, and it makes no sense to me. It can't be that. So, is it school, or is it mom? And after we had our prayer meeting that morning where we prayed for a successful surgery for Kai, and thanked God for his many, many blessings, she walked up to me, wrapped her arms around me, squeezed a little tighter than her normal hugs, and the floodgates were open again. Her uncle often jokes with her about being a dirty crier, meaning she holds nothing back and doesn't really care about what she looks like or who is around when it happens. And it was no different this morning. Are you okay? I ask. Yeah, I'm fine, she says, to which I responded, yeah, I know you're fine. You're freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. You know how I know? Because I grew up being just fine. The difference between Kerah and I is when things bothered me, I couldn't figure out why or where it was coming from. I didn't go to anyone for help. I didn't trust anyone. When I expressed my emotions, it was in a much more troubling and embarrassing than crying. I was taught at a very young age not to cry. I saw my father cry maybe once or twice. Men don't cry. Apparently it was a sign of weakness, and being vulnerable is just not an option. In fact, getting in trouble was even hard because if you didn't cry a little, that means the punishment wasn't hard enough. But if you cried too much, then you'd get more for carrying on so much. Yet another damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. This was just one of the many instances where I learned to compartmentalize and bottle up my emotions and feelings. I didn't express them. That wouldn't have turned out so good. But by the time I became a teenager, it got harder and harder to deal with it all, hide it all, bury it all. Fear turned into frustration, frustration turned to anger, anger turned to pure rage. I was a good kid and did what I was taught. I kept behind closed doors what was to be kept behind closed doors. I even created new closed doors that I only had the key to, and I've never let anyone come close to opening them. I learned to get by until I was by myself and either bury my head in the pillow, scream to the top of my lungs, or just start punching anything to feel better. I know it sounds so stupid, but I would use anything and everything as punching bags until my knuckles were swollen or bleeding. The physical pain was better than the emotional pain. The better it felt, the less I cared about what people saw and thought of me. Rage began to consume me. And afterwards, the guilt would settle in. I'd promised myself I would change. Then I would tell myself, I'm fine. I could get it under control. Yep, I was freaked out, not only insecure, but irrational, neurotic, and emotional. For the past few years, I've been waging a war in my mind between what I feel and what I believe. There was a contradiction of God's character that I needed resolved. Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him, If ye continue in my word, then ye are my disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:31-32. The truth shall set me free? What is the truth? If this is freedom from doubt, fear, shame, unforgiveness, anger, rage, manipulation, and resentment, I want it. I need it. You see, I struggle with the very common question. Why does a good, loving God allow bad things to happen? Well, in my case, I struggle with so many things that happen to me, not by my choosing. Things that I couldn't control, but God could have. Things that hurt, but God didn't stop. Things that were terribly terrifying that God didn't take away. Things that were embarrassing and shameful that God allowed. For what reason? If Psalms 139 is true that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, I sure didn't feel like it much. God, where were you when I was so compliant that instead of disappointing the coach and running to the bathroom, I took my position on the diamond and peed my pants during a baseball game? And when I went to the dugout, kids left me on the end of the bench by myself. God, where were you when I couldn't even fight the bully at school because I convinced myself I was a coward? God, where were you the day I was shoved under a bed to kiss another little girl like we were some stupid Barbie dolls? God, where were you the night I thought my father was killing my mother? God, where were you when I would bury my head, cry myself to sleep at night, and pray for you to stop it all? God, where were you? Once again, this is obviously all my feelings being bottled up and put away under lock and key. But they still find their way out, and it wreaks havoc on my life. I know and believe that while everything I've said has happened, there is one major part that is untrue. God was there. God was there from the beginning. God was there when I didn't know it. God was there when I didn't feel it. God was there through it all. God was there at the park when a couple of guys tried to lure me into their car and kidnap me. God was there by giving me a grandmother that would take me to church every time I visited her over the summer. God was there the day Paul visited my house and invited my family to church. God was there the day I finally stood up and said no more. God was there by giving me a sister that took me in and was fighting the same fight I was. God was there when he picked Kai for me to marry, begin a family with, and begin healing. God was there when he gave me a new family, all 18 of them. God was there the other day when I held my daughter and told her that it'll be okay. You know why? Because I know it will be okay. I finally got my answer that made sense to me. I don't believe all my pain was God's original will for my life, just as his original will wasn't for man to fall in the garden from sin. I don't believe God's will for my father was to become an abusive, angry alcoholic who was shameful and demeaning to his family. I don't believe God's will for my mother was to become so drowned in her own victimhood of loss and abuse that she couldn't even pull out of it for her kids. We are all given the opportunity to choose God and his ways. Guess what? My parents didn't. I suffered for it. Sins were committed against God, and I was on the receiving end of those sins a lot of times. I didn't set out each day and try to agitate, irritate, or manipulate to get a response, and that was where the struggle began. If I didn't ask for it, or want it, or even old enough to understand it, then why did God do it? I realized he didn't. They did. That changed everything. Just because all of that may not have been his original will for my life, doesn't mean now he is a God of chaos or happenstance. It's not like anything surprised him. I, without question, choose to believe Romans 8:28-31. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called. And whom he called, them he also justified. And whom he justified, them he also glorified. What shall we say then of these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? It is also confirmed in Psalms 37:23 and 24. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. Today I gave you a little background on how I became an insecure, raging control freak. Next time, I'd like to discuss how we can move forward from the fallen old man and become a new, redeemed creature through Christ by letting go of those things that hold us back and pressing on in those things that carry us forward. If God be for us, who can be against us?
So, Lee, you hit on a very universal thought, and that is, if there's a good God, which you said, why does evil happen? Now, first of all, I think we need to ask ourselves, what is evil? We say good and evil, but what is evil? To a kid, I thought it was evil getting a beating. It was wrong. Was it evil? Still in my way of thinking, and sometimes as adults, I go back to my child. And my child says, oh, it was so wrong, so wrong, so wrong. And yet, I don't know. Christ's father died when he was probably around 12 or maybe a little earlier. And so he became the breadwinner of the family at a young age. I don't know. Was that good or was that evil? Or how do you mix those three things, purpose, good, and evil together?
I think that's a very good, important question to think about and ask, because I don't know. We know what the Bible says is good and evil. We know what things are, but man, when you're a kid, some things that you think are supposed to be good just aren't good.
Mm-hmm.
And then lies get turned into truth, and it doesn't do anything to glorify God. So I would say good and truth are synonymous, and they glorify God, and anything that is not that is evil, because it just gets converted over to a lie.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if somewhere within our psyche of the Christian growing up in the church, it has been communicated to us that God will never leave us nor forsake us, and He will not abandon us, and it seems good, which absolutely that's what it says. Then when I think about David and him having to run from Saul for doing nothing, I mean, Saul was just jealous of David, and so David had to flee, run for his life. So how do we reconcile that David did nothing wrong, yet his life was in jeopardy from nothing he did for himself, and God didn't kill Saul? He didn't kill your dad either. Didn't kill my dad either. How do we come to grips with that? Because in our mind we think in a linear fashion that good is good and bad is bad, and God punishes bad and God loves good, which nothing wrong with that. Yet in the practical application of our life, that doesn't seem to happen.
No. And then to make things worse is not even like growing up in the dark. Wasn't taught biblical teachings. I wasn't taught where to get all that from. I wasn't taught until I was probably junior high when I chose to accept Christ and start learning on my own, and God put you in my life and everything else. But as a young age, all that foundation was not taught. And so to get to a resolve later in life, that's kind of what I think's taken me so long to do, is because I was thinking about it I really didn't want to write what I wrote, and I didn't really, because I grew up like, you don't question anything. If you question it, you're in trouble. I mean, that's wrong. That's wrong. You don't question anything. So you have all these, grow up with these feelings and these emotions about God, and yet I believe, and I know that that's not truth, even though that's how I felt about God. But I would never really admit that that's how I felt, because that's wrong. And partly in writing that, I think, is coming to that resolve of that, okay, God, that may be what I thought and felt about you, but that's not truth. That's not reality.
Sometimes I think it's hard to distinguish when we're little. We think, well, if this is bad and this is good, and if I get what I want, it's good. If I like this, it's good. If my parents treat me well, it's good. And we think that parents are good, and parents are not good. Not all parents are good. You know, they're just not. Now, why I got parents that I had a mother that was good. I had no father, and I had a stepfather that was, in my opinion, pretty much on the evil side. But why? You know, why? I'm sure it was kind of like Kerah crying, because why did they have to change their curriculum? They didn't need to change that on her. At the same time, her mother was going in for surgery. I mean, life is supposed to be comfortable and good and convenient and lollipops and all the good stuff, right?
Yep. And then I agree, and that's kind of the way I grew up, is like, this is wrong. Like, I would when I would play, I would always, like, the way I would play is like, I'm kidnapped. I mean, these aren't my real parents. I mean, like, what kid thinks, oh my gosh, I've been kidnapped, these aren't my real parents, I gotta escape this. And I think that's what it is you're looking for an escape. And for me, my escape was control. And like, I didn't ever remember getting to a point of like, you know, okay, they must be right or whatever. I never had that sense of like, this is right. And even not going into church and not doing that, I mean, I just never had a sense, this is right, this is okay. And so my escape was, well, yeah, I get out of it. You know, I'm going to grow up and I'm not going to be like this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do these things. And then you realize that when you can't express that, and then like, it is embarrassing. I mean, my temper is not like it used to be at all. I used to just could take a hammer and I didn't care what I destroyed. I mean, and it's sad.
Because we find ways to vent. Sometimes it's a physical way of venting, because it's just like there's a block inside of us that doesn't understand, and we don't know why. And it's almost like, you know, it's happened, but no one explains it to you. You know, I don't know why my real father abandoned me. You know, my mother tried to convince me over and over again, he loves you, he loves you, he loves you. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. No, he didn't. I've never seen him in my entire life. He's dead now, I'm sure. But he chose my sister, but not me. So the inconveniences of that, and sometimes we don't know how to grapple with that. We don't know, I mean, our minds don't, there's no easy answer for adults, much less for a kid. And so you just kind of boil over on the inside.
And then you have all the inconsistency of, in the middle of that, of, your mom telling you don't grow up and be like your dad, but then be the victim of it and like just encourage it, and then it's like, well, you asked for it, you should get it, and it's like just inconsistency after inconsistency.
Oh, totally. Hey, Mom, why didn't you marry him? Come on.
It's like you threatened, you left him once, and he didn't change, so why'd you go back?
Yeah. Why did you subject us to it? And we don't sometimes understand there is a failed world. Mm-hmm. It's fallen. It's a fallen world. And unless it follows Christ, it's just fallen. And what do you expect from people like that? I mean, what do you expect from your dad? He was an alcoholic. What I expect from my father, he was a rageaholic. We call it dry alcoholic. Why? Why me there? And then sometimes we want to make God so good that we can't question him, like you said. You don't question God. God is good. It's one thing to get your butt beat by your parent, but another thing to get God slam you on the head because you said, right. God, I didn't like it. It wasn't fair. And God responds back in a loving way. It's evil. It's not meant to be fair. Fair is not evil. You grew up in a world. I wanted you, but I had to have you in a world that's imperfect. Now, he's saying to us, look, I know the end from the beginning, and I know what you're going to end up as, and I know what you're going to do with your kids, and I know that you'll never repeat that after you pass a certain point. Mm-hmm. And then that's the purpose.
Yep.
Because I think, to me, everything comes down to the purpose. All things work together for the good. They're not good, but they work together for the good. Yep. That they come out. I know it's kind of like when I used to change the oil in my truck. I always get oil all over me. And I'd be going, this sucks. This is really bad. But in the end, my truck would run longer. So right. I endured some of the things for the outcome. And we endured when we were too young to know anything. Mm-hmm. But thank God he guided us the whole way. His hand, like you said, his hand was upon us. We right. just couldn't see it.
Right.
So sometimes I think there's still adults out there all over the world who are kids who still can't see God's hand.
Right. Right. And that's what I hope to get across is that, at the end of the day, we have the choice. I mean, you can either look for the truth or you can look for just being stuck and just being a victim of your circumstances of where you were born and who you were born to and whatever. Or you can say, by the grace of God, here am I.
Yeah. Without God being an answer, there is no answer in this world.
Right.
There's no way to do it. So
yep.
I think that's pretty profoundly, and I'm sure it's going to speak to a lot of people. I used to think I was the only kid on the block regularly beaten. And on my block, it may have been. But down the block, there was always someone else.
Yep.
So I think that's good. I think every time we can reveal what we've gone through and what we've experienced, we just help other people who've not been there yet. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your energy. Thanks for your transparency.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hope it helps.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Bye.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for Around the Supper Table. At Sanctuary Family Farms, we want to be real. Whether that's through our blogs, daily verses, or even Nana's recipes, we want to share the messages that God has laid on each of our hearts. If you liked what you heard today or want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at Sanctuary Family Farms or our website at www.sanctuaryfamilyfarms.com, where we share our recipes and blogs and sell farm fresh beef and pork. We can't wait for you to join us again for next week's episode.